Anime Abandoned is made possible by the generous fans on Patreon. Thank you.
Okay, real talk here. It's been several months since my last episode, and I feel like I should fill you all in about what's been happening to me during this time so you all can understand my headspace. If you don't care and you just want the review, you can skip to this part of the video. Between the last episode and now, several close family members of mine have gone through some serious cardiac issues. One was even readmitted to the hospital after going through triple bypass surgery. And then another close family member of mine sadly lost their battle with stage 4 cancer last October. Needless to say, I was in no mood to be entertaining. And then it got worse. As some of you may know, last November, after I had my time to grieve, I began running into some pretty serious technical issues. Trying to keep this as brief as possible, after reinstalling Windows and updating every single driver that I could, I came to the sobering realization that my data drive is failing. And I had to spend several days trying to back up every bit of data that I had just so I don't lose project files. Eventually, I'm going to have to pay the piper and replace my laptop. Not sure how I'm going to do that, but that's just going to have to be a problem for future Bennett. But guess what? We're still not done. As you can plainly see, I'm back home. But my luggage isn't. Why? Because the plane that I flew in on was delayed and they had to leave the airport without all of our luggage because the airport we were going to apparently needed that plane more than all the passengers needed their luggage. As of this recording, the airline has yet to tell either me or my wife where our luggage is. I've been advised to not identify this particular airline, but rest assured, they will never get my money ever again. So, trying to pick myself back up after being knocked around for the last month and a half, I realized something. I still gotta talk about Trinity Blood!
You have no right to look down on him. None.
I don't need your sermon! Tinkerbell Coordination System, activate!
Premiering on Adult Swim in September of 2006, Trinity Blood is a boring, annoying, creatively dead, and amateurish TV series that has earned a somewhat lasting legacy as one of the most blatant examples of cynical plagiarism in anime. What isn't stolen is tried at best, and if not for the fact that it was on Adult Swim, I'd bet hardly anyone would even remember the show existing at all. Harsh? You bet. But right now, I couldn't care less if I'm exhuming the corpse of an 18-year-old series to pee in its rotting face, all for the sake of venting. It's bad, and it should feel bad. Is this healthy? Probably not, but after this 20-minute tongue blistering, I think you'll all agree that this series deserves it. This is Trinity Blood. Part 1. The Formalities. In the post-Armageddon world where humanity nearly destroyed themselves but gained a second moon for some unexplained reason, the Vatican is among the last of the remaining kingdoms of man. Theirs is a precarious situation. To the east in Byzantium lies a rival empire of vampires. A vampire, as it were. To the west is the independent kingdom of Albion, a land of technological ingenuity and the remains of Peter Molyneux's many broken promises. Global peace is kept on a knife's edge, with both Vatican and Byzantium agents being sent all across Europe to keep the careful balance from toppling over into all-out war. One of said agents is Abel Nightroad. That's right, Abel Nightroad.
Is there something I can get you?
A cup of milk tea would be nice, with 13 spoonfuls of sugar.
I'm sorry?
A priest within the Vatican, Abel is also something known as a Krusnik, ostensibly a vampire that feeds on other vampires, just in case this anime wasn't early mid-2000s enough for you. Abel is sent here, there, and everywhere to investigate possible malfeasance and facilitate peacekeeping efforts, all under direct orders from the right hand and sister of the Pope, Caterina. These efforts to maintain the peace are constantly under duress, both directly and indirectly from a secretive vampiric terrorist cell called the Rosenkreuzorden. Along his many journeys, Abel meets allies within the other long-reaching branches of the Vatican, none so quote-unquote plot important as Sister Esther, a nun within the order who, spoiler alert, is the unknowing heir apparent to the throne of Albion. Trust me, it's not nearly as interesting as it sounds. From the premise alone, you can pretty much gather for yourself what a typical plot for an episode is gonna be. Abel sent somewhere, runs into some agents of the Rosenkreuzorden, a vampiric gun battle ensues, characters brood, and the day is saved. Not that the Orden is ever all that broken up by having their plans foiled, because they always seem to have yet another plan that's going to work like gangbusters.
We work on a much grander canvas, something more along the lines of, and I know this sounds cliche, a new world order.
As such, it never feels like Abel and company ever really accomplish anything by their own actions in the story, and you just want to skip ahead until something of actual consequence happens. Or, at the least, get past all the dry, meandering political intrigue that couldn't grab a hold of your attention if it was threatening your dog at gunpoint.
There is only one way we can save Istvan from the Eastern Empire. I beseech you to mobilize our military forces to take back Istvan.
The Tristan belongs to the Kingdom of Albion. Think of the strain that would place on our diplomatic relations.
Director Tomohiro Hirata, mostly known as a key animator and episode director, does little to actually elevate the story. Shot composition and editing are asleep at the wheel when the characters aren't fighting. Unless there's some kind of artistic reason why nearly every cut is made with a fade wipe that's just going right over my head. And even during the fight scenes, the choreography and editing are often so uninvolved and yet so spastic that it's just pointless to try and get invested. Not like the dearth of engaging characters make it any easier to care about what's going on. There is a rotating cast of characters that either make one-off appearances for the episode or arc, or they disappear wholesale for nearly the entire run after their introduction, only for them to come back into the plot just in time for the last episode. Why yes, that does include the main antagonist, Abel's brother, Cain. These painfully underwritten one-note characters run the gamut between forgettable and outright irritating. The Crown Prince being Ion Fortuna, a high-ranking member of the vampiric elite with a quick temper who cannot stop screeching!
I'll kill you! I swear it! I'll rip you to pieces with my bare hands! You'll pay for what you did to him!
The more eagle-eared of you out there might recognize that voice as belonging to Aaron Dismuke, fresh off his star-making performance as Alphonse Elric from Full Metal Alchemist. Yeah, puberty hit him pretty hard.
Now get this straight. You may not like me, but at the moment, no one else is offering you any help. So stop whining like a child.
You'll pay for that!
The runner-up and the characters I want to see drop-kicked into a meat grinder contest is the freaking Pope himself, Alessandro, a fresh-off-the-nipple wuss whose every line of dialogue can be summed up with a mewling whimper.
I have no idea where I am. Those people with the guns were so angry.
I get what they were trying to do. A kid like him being given the awesome responsibility of leading the Holy Roman Empire would probably quake under the pressure. But there's a line, and that line is being scared of little girls.
Yay, you're awake!
Bruh. Even though I'm trying to keep this particular section of the episode brief, not delving too deep into the nitty-gritty details of the story for the sake of my dwindling Pepto-Bismol supply, I still hope all of you can understand why I feel Trinity Blood is bad. It's bad because it lacks good. Good characters, good story, good reason to exist, anything and everything good, it lacks. No matter how I try to look at Trinity Blood, I keep coming to the same conclusion over and over again. It's a plodding, dull, lifeless series that continually spins its tires and pretends it's going somewhere. It's utterly galling to watch it and realize just how little it has to say for itself, and how little you can say about it. Well, maybe there's one thing you can say about it. Part 2. This seems familiar. I think we've all been dancing around the issue for long enough. Let's get to the part you've all been waiting for. If anyone does remember watching Trinity Blood once upon a time ago, they'll most likely remember it for being a gigantic, unapologetic ripoff of Trigun.
Wait for me!
Hey, Father, throw the ball!
Come on, over here!
Hey, give me the ball!
No way!
But that's so unfair to Trinity Blood. It rips off way more than Trigun.
Nanomachine Kruznik O2. Power output 40%. Activate.
Releasing control art restriction to level 3. Level 2. Situation A, release level 1.
And I mean a lot more.
Excuse me, but is that a battle scar? Forgive me for prying, but it's amazing that a Terran could survive such a wound.
A lot more.
We'll make sure you're safely incapacitated before we turn you over to the Rosenkreuz.
Watching Trinity Blood is like reliving the Leonardo DiCaprio meme over and over again. Not that any of this is exactly new information. Even when the anime was brand spanking new, fans were quick to make the obvious connections on forum threads that are still viewable today. But I believe we all mostly dismissed this as just being kind of funny. And don't get me wrong, it is funny to see something as embarrassingly transparent as Trinity Blood try so hard to ape from other, more successful anime without understanding what made those anime successful to begin with. But I also feel like this lets the anime off the hook if we just treat it as a joke. At least not without addressing just how lazy and cynical this all is. Let's also be clear that this isn't necessarily a case of cut and dry plagiarism as exhibited in H. Bomber Guy's recent video essay. It's not as if Trinity Blood has Abel wielding a revolver that turns his arm into a gigantic energy cannon that he uses to shoot a hole into the moon. No, this is more like when Avatar was accused of ripping off a novelette called Call Me Joe. A story about a paraplegic man who remotely controls a synthetic life form on the inhospitable surface of Jupiter, where he becomes a leader of the indigenous life forms and thus leaves his human body and life behind to continue a new existence as Joe.
I see you.
For the record, this wasn't the first time that James Cameron was accused of lifting directly from other people's work, as Harlan Ellison, a prolific science fiction writer, filed suit against the studio behind the Terminator, Orion, over alleged plagiarism involving his Outer Limits episode entitled Soldier. The party settled out of court in 1986, with Ellison getting an undisclosed sum and his name in the credits. One important addendum here, Cameron would go on the record decades afterward saying that he was against the settlement and insisted that he didn't infringe on Ellison's work. Accusations of plagiarism are a serious litigious thing and should not be taken lightly. That being said, in the case of Trinity Blood, it's quite obvious where the main sources of inspiration came from if you're at all familiar with them. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar. Our protagonist is a wandering, clumsy, and bespectacled goofball who hides the fact that they're actually a secret badass who can perform superhuman feats when the situation calls for it. He also happens to be an all-powerful vampire who does the bidding of a no-nonsense, hyper-capable blonde woman who comes from a long, noble family line. Along with other armed agents of the Vatican, he regularly does battle against a German fascist vampiric cult who wants to take over the world. His arch-nemesis is his estranged brother, who was responsible for the death of an important woman in his life and has sworn vengeance on all humanity. We now go live to the scene of Trinity Blood's creation. Trigun. Hellsing. Hey, you got your Trigun on my Trigun. Yeah, I'm kidding, but I don't believe the truth is very far from this. Trinity Blood began as a one-shot story before becoming serialized in a Japanese magazine called The Sneaker in 2000, before ultimately being collected into a series of light novels. The series was written by Sunao Matsumoto, writing under the pen name Sunao Yoshida, whose visual identity I had a hell of a time confirming because Google is a broken POS that thinks Masashi Kishimoto is Sunao because a random-ass French website purports this is him. Sorry. Different rant. Information that's been translated into English about Sunao is scanty, but we do know he tragically died at a young age before he could finish Trinity Blood, which would more than explain the non-ending of the anime series. Think the ending to Inuyasha. You know, if you want to piss yourself off. Outside of Trinity Blood, Sunao only published 2 other stories. The search engine-proof fighter, entitled All in capital letters, and his 1997 debut work, Genocide Angel. An English translation of Genocide Angel doesn't seem to exist, but if we judge a book by its cover, always safe to do that, and seeing how his later work panned out, we can assume the guy really loved combining Christian mythology and symbols with guns.
Which was the style at the time.
So I ask, is it too much of a stretch to think that Sunao took more than a few cues from both Trigun and Hellsing, considering that both manga were quite popular around the late 90s? And considering, well... This isn't to say that Sunao himself was guilty of plagiarism, at least in the academic and lawful sense, but I would argue he was guilty of being very, very derivative and not having the diligence and/or ability to take his inspiration and make them his own. And as such, Trinity Blood skirts way too close to the line, to the point that one wonders why no one bothered to take legal action, especially since there have been settlements for far less egregious cases. Of course, there's also another party to consider. Studio Gonzo. The name Studio Gonzo tends to rise the bile of anyone who remembers it. The work they did in the mid-2000s are some of the most infamous moments in the history of hated anime original endings. Desert Punk, Gantz, Hellsing.
Who are you?
They also had a tendency to let the animation quality peter out by the end of a series run, a byproduct of them pumping out anime by the literal truckload from 2002 to 2008, all before the financial crisis and mismanagement caused them to be swallowed up by a parent company. What kind of mismanagement? Well, I couldn't tell you. But how do you account for the company going through this amount of restructuring in such a short amount of time? I feel like there's a word for this. But what could it be? The stink of Gonzo is laden all throughout Trinity Blood, but it's at its most pungent during these obviously lifted moments. Now, I'm willing to give Sunao the benefit of the doubt on his creative intentions, as I'm sure he didn't mean to have Katarina look so much like Integra Hellsing, or have this vampire of the episode be Lust Light, as it were. But an unscrupulous cut-corner company like Gonzo... Oh yeah, I totally buy them biting wherever they could. In Gonzo's hands, Trinity Blood's trite setup and characters are all the more apparent and unignorable, highlighted by dubious attempts to copy from more well-regarded anime, all the while pandering to an American audience. It'd be hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic. So I guess the last remaining question is there anything positive to take from this? Part 3, Under Reconsideration. One of the most insidious parts about all of this is that not only did Trinity Blood lift from Trigun, especially when it comes to Abel and Vash, but Trinity Blood just plain didn't get Trigun. That Abel puts on a clown's face is one thing, but at no point during the series are we ever clued in as to why he does this. At first, you'd think it would be to ward off suspicion of him being a vampire's vampire, but his insistence on doing so endangers his allies and other humans constantly.
You stood by while countless numbers of people were slaughtered in Barcelona, including that sister who was one of your closest comrades.
This causes Abel's character to come off as emotionally selfish, wanting to preserve his act for the sake of no one but himself.
I am a sinner.
That was 900 years ago! I'm sure she's forgiven you.
I cannot forgive myself.
Whereas with Vash, not only is he a wanted man, so of course he would try to plant some seeds of doubt as to his identity, but he also uses it as a defense mechanism to keep people at the right distance from him.
It's not exactly something I like girls to see. I think many of them would run away.
I wouldn't run away.
But once real danger starts presenting itself, he drops the mask and goes out of his way to say he is Vash the Stampede to scare people off, and thus get them away to safety. He loves people, but he knows he cannot be a part of them.
You actually think we're people? Absurd.
Huh?
You and I are men, yet not of men. We are dark, diabolical puppets.
There is a real weight to Vash's tragedy, and it's given voice in one of my favorite lines in all of anime.
You always smile and seem really friendly, but the way you smiled was so empty it hurt to watch you. You're hurting like crazy on the inside, yet you grin and bear it.
I suppose this, more than anything, is why I find Trinity Blood to be so detestable as an anime. If you can't get what you're trying to steal from, don't steal from it at all. But I will give Trinity Blood one thing. It made me rethink Trigun. That Trinity Blood took the allegorical Cain and Abel story with Vash and knives and made it quite literal allowed me to think about Vash and knives in that context, which hadn't occurred to me before. And after realizing that, I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't think about it before. Do you see how much more rewarding it is for your audience to come to their own conclusions without you spelling it out for them, Trinity Blood? I feel like I want to go and talk about Trigun again and do an actual proper review of it. You know, unlike the last time I talked about it. And you know what? Maybe I will. But for now, Christmas is just around the corner. And I feel like there's going to be quite the discussion around our next movie. But in the meantime, I want to thank you all for watching this episode of Anime Abandoned. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't. If you want to see me talk about an actually good vampire anime, then check out my episode on Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust right there. And if you want to support me more directly, I do have a Patreon as well as a store and links down below in the description box. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time.